Hello and welcome to Business Week, the program that brings you top business stories that made their headlines during the course of this week, including special news features, market data, and much more. Welcome to the show. Well, here's the highlight of the biggest stories we tracked for you over the course of this week. Now, on the local front, President Muhammadu Buhari has directed the NNPC Limited to be incorporated, approving the appointment of the board and management. Total value of over-the-counter foreign exchange futures traded rose to $47.32 billion in 4 years. Now, the total net asset value of the entire mutual funds registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission recorded a decline of 197.49 billion naira in the first 8 months of this year. On the international front, Royal Dutch Shell plans to also start producing low-carbon jet fuel at scale by the year 2025 in an attempt to encourage the world's airlines to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil exporter, has also kept its ranking as China's top crude supplier for a 9th straight month. In the month of August, its major producers also relaxed production cuts. Now, data from the General Administration of Customs shows the Saudi oil arrivals surged by 53% from a year earlier to 8.06 million tons, an equivalent of 1.96 million barrels per day. And still on the international front, the International Monetary Fund Executive Board have also met to discuss a report prepared for the World Bank alleging that IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva pressured staff to alter data to favor China while serving as the bank's CEO. It's now time to bring you special packages prepared by our correspondents. In this first report, the National Institute of Town Planning has warned the Department of Petroleum Resources against fuel and non-compliance among owners of farm tanks, owners as well to the land use regulations of the state. The call was made by the chairman of the body during a press conference to mark this year's annual general meeting. Adesewa Odushoga reports.
Following the reopening of 8 petroleum tank firms by the Department of Petroleum Resources, stating the state-owned agency lacked the constitutional backing to close the depot, the Lagos State chapter of the National Institute of Town Planning is calling for a halt. At a press conference organized by the body to announce its forthcoming annual general meeting, the chairman of NITP, Mr. Ayo Adejumo, says the DPR only has the power to give operational license and not control over land use or development of structures for the operation of the business.
We want to advise the management of DPR to henceforth desist from such illegal action of usurping the farm of the Lagos State government, of usurping the power of the Lagos State government through operations of Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development. They should clearly advise their clients, that is, owners of these farm tanks, to do the needful by obtaining statutory development permits from the appropriate town planning and build or develop according to approval granted.
Ahead of the annual general meeting, the NITP Lagos chairman reads out the achievement of his administration in the last 12 months, which includes the implementation of the Land Use Planning Analysis Report.
This administration within the last 12 months was also able to push and achieve the implementation of the Land Use Planning Analysis Report, LUPA, as a required document for processing of planning applications in Lagos State, as enshrined in the Lagos State Urban and Regional Planning and Development Law 2019.
The National Institute of Town Planning is set to hold a week-long annual general meeting to begin from September 21 to September 28, 2021, to focus on the theme Envisioning the Future of Lagos, the role of urban planning and management. The body urges Lagos residents to complement the government's effort by complying with town planning regulations in the state.
And in this next report now, small and medium-scale industries in Nigeria will continue to suffer setbacks as long as smugglers persist in sabotaging the economy. Well, this is the concern expressed by the acting comptroller of the Federal Unit Zone A of the Nigeria Customs Service over the unrelenting stance of smugglers in the zone. TVC News correspondent Ifeanyi tells us more.
The approach of the Yuletide often leads to an escalation in smuggling activities. Smugglers in desperation deploy any means possible to bring in contraband goods. A desperation taken too far, according to the newly appointed acting comptroller of the Federal Operations Unit Zone A, who warns that unprovoked attacks on officers will no longer be treated with case gloves. The interception of more than 3,000 bags of foreign parboiled rice at several border areas within 10 days speaks to the unabating trend.
We are matching them strength for strength. As a matter of fact, the intimidation and the killing of my officers, that will not deter me. I told the traditional ruler the other day that is the last thing I will ever take. We will not mind to put up our rule of engagement. The rule of engagement states that where your life is threatened, you save your life.
He also calls the attention of Dangote Group to the recurring use of the company's trucks by drivers to smuggle rice.
We have about 3 or 4 of it with us now, the same Dangote. But why? If you want to carry cement, you carry cement. Now, it is now the new trend to mix rice with cement.
Other seizures made within the same period include tires, second-hand clothing, used vehicles and hundreds of cartons of frozen poultry products, all of which fall under absolute prohibitions.
I will use this opportunity to tell Nigerians that they should stop the consumption of these frozen poultry products. Some may come to tell you that they don't have money to buy the locally made poultry, but this one, they are consuming what? Toxic. This is poison.
While noting that the seized items will be destroyed, he clarifies that the Nigeria Customs Service does not make laws nor issue ban on items, maintaining that its core mandate is to implement government fiscal policies.
And on that note, it's now time to delve into the feature of the show today as we assess selective food price watch for the month of August. Don't go away. Thank you very much for still staying with us. Let's now deal with the crux of today's discourse. The average price of 1 dozen of Greek eggs, medium size, increased on a month-on-month basis by 1.4% to hit 585 naira 64 kobo just last month from 577 naira 55 kobo recorded in the month of July. Now, this was disclosed by the National Bureau of Statistics and the Selected Food Price Watch data for last month. The report also shows that the average price of a piece of a Greek egg, medium-sized, increased on a month-on-month basis by 0.89% to sell at 53 naira 20 kobo. Now, the average price of 1 kilogram of rice also decreased on a month-on-month basis by 1.1% to sell at 546 naira 71 kobo. Meanwhile, the average price of 1 kilogram of tomato also decreased month-on-month by 4.45% to sell at 396 naira 38 kobo just last month. Similarly, the price of 1 kilogram of yam tuber on an average decreased on a month-on-month basis by 1.05% to sell at 305 naira 48 kobo. Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more, I have Nkiru Opereke, the Chief Executive Officer of EnviroGrow Farms, as we focus more on food crop production. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Daniela, for having me on.
Now, the market sentiment over the prices of food items and other commodities leaves many complaining of affordability versus availability of food items. Now, the impact of insecurity is really biting deep into our production capacity. Do you see any major change in food prices coming in the nearest future, as we've also reiterated in my intro, and as we're having new conversations now focusing on creating new food production hubs in states that are relatively more secure. Take, for example, the Southwest.
Yes, with what the security we're seeing now in the north, and that's where the majority of our food is coming from. I think there's a conversation that has to be had by the south about increasing food production, because basically everything that's produced in the north can actually be produced in the south. Just that there will maybe a different variety of pepper that grows better in the north that might not grow as well in the southwest. But yes, the conversation needs to be had in the south because we're dependent on them for food. And if there's a cutoff in any way, and we also know that apart from this security problem, the infrastructure problem is such a big issue. During the rains, which is what is happening now, most of the roads are bad. So even the time it takes for food to come in from the north to the south, half of the food is also bad. So that's also affecting the cost of food when it finally lands here.
And now, what food items do you see as recording some decreases further? Looking at seasonal elements here, at least we know during the wet season we expect some produce, and then during the dry season we also expect some. Now we have the Ember months too, and everyone knows how much we hold on to saving every single naira as things get a little more expensive.
It's actually just tomatoes, peppers, because during the rainy season, there's a decreased production, there's so much loss. So during the drier season that starts around October, it's just because the rains have taken longer than normal. Tomatoes, peppers, onions should start going down. Then around December, January, when farmers also harvesting beans, that's the cheapest you get beans for the period. It might not go down to what it was last year, but by December, January, when there's a harvest of some of those things, the prices go down. But basically, the prices are not going to go lower than it was like January 2021, by the time we get to 2022. Because when prices go up, the cost of production has really gone up. But seasonal changes actually affect more of vegetables, really tomatoes, peppers, and onions. The rest of the food items actually are stable. They don't, because if you notice, when they harvested yams, the prices of yam did not go down so much. It actually, where it went up to was actually where it has remained. So we're not gonna see a lot of changes on the food items, just only the vegetables.
And at a point like this, also, we have to have very, very serious conversations around reducing post-harvest losses from the current stock we have, look at storage and also transportation strategies that will help cut the cost of production to purchase food items. What sort of conversations do you also think at state levels we ought to start adopting in terms of funding mechanized farming, investment in processing, and then value addition and pricing of items?
The conversation should be not even on mechanized farming, it should be actually more on infrastructure. Everybody who knows that most farms are actually in areas less traveled, so the roads are bad. So many times before the produce comes from where the farm is to the first set of area where the sales happen, half of the produce are already bad. So government has to make sure that infrastructure roads leading to those farms are good. So it cuts down the time from the farm to the market. Then they should also start making investments in coal hubs. Like if in a rural area, like say, okay, let me even take where I farm in Lagos State. Most of us farm in Ekpe, putting like a coal hub for all the farmers to be able to store what they have harvested till they send to the market. And even putting coal hubs in the market. So even when the things arrive in the market, they can be stored till when it is sold. Those are the conversations states can have. Structural roads, cold storage, and even cold trucks to move the things from farm. We shouldn't be moving to things like tomato and peppers in baskets piled on top of each other on trucks that break down. Those things everybody knows in developed world are carried in reefers, cold storage. So from the time it is harvested to the time it gets to the last consumer, it is in a very good state. If we cut out those losses, then there's even an incentive for most farmers to go back and produce more. But when farmers keep losing money every year, the incentive to produce more is gone. And what happens is that the few that is produced, the prices go up in the market.
And then talking about processing and value addition.
Yes, because for us, in lots of times, we overproduce, or not overproduce, we produce well because there's no storage, a lot of it goes bad. Then in a couple of months, there's a scarcity of those. Tomatoes are always sold fresh. If we can even put dehydrators in some of those places. Abroad, I mean, people eat sun-dried tomatoes. So if we put dehydrators, those tomatoes can be a buffer for the period where we don't have tomatoes. So there has to be another level, or even paste. And the Dangote farm that was set up to produce tomato paste hasn't been functioning. So during this period, they can't even mop up the excess that's been produced. So yes, there has to be a discussion or even investment in processing. Some of the things we consume don't have to be eaten at that fresh state. If there's some level of processing, dehydrating, that's even the lowest form of processing, and that will also help to buffer prices when there's a scarcity.
Definitely, crop production is a challenge in business, with the crops being constantly exposed to unfavorable weather conditions. Weather conditions and climate changes play an important role in determining the pace of crop production from a global to domestic space. Now, however, during times when a global food security strongly depends on crop production, there is no place for any limitations. Let's look at a field here well versed in the area of greenhouse farming. What sort of future do you see here in Nigeria as we think more readily about creating new hubs?
At the present, all greenhouses in Nigeria are imported. Everybody knows what the dollar is saying. So it's not going to be economically viable for people to keep investing in greenhouses. At the moment, because labor is cheap, and apart from having greenhouses, you have to make sure that you have power. I've had a greenhouse over 8 years, and I run a generator every day, 8 hours, to be able to support the plants in my greenhouse. It is not economically viable for us to produce food in greenhouse for the whole country. It is still open feed production, except we have power sorted out and the greenhouses are manufactured in Nigeria. But if you're importing the greenhouses, we cannot feed ourselves by greenhouses. So let's leave that conversation. It is still going to be mass production in the field.
So hence, how serious is the conversation of still going back to the fact that we have a whole lot of arable land and then we must utilize this as our resource base?
The government has to put infrastructure, because having arable land but you don't have roads to get to the arable land, you can't use it. Having arable land and you don't have security to get to that arable land, it's of no use. So the government has to put things in place before we can produce enough to feed us. We're still doing a lot of importation of fresh produce we can actually grow here. So if the infrastructure to get to the farms are not there, the roads, power, so people can live in those locations and able to make a living, and also security sorted out, then we still keep having this conversation year after year.
And then our irrigation systems as well. To what extent do you want to see improvement within this regard to support crop production?
Without power, you can't have an irrigation system. Irrigation system works on power, and we know we don't have power in the rural areas. So how many of the farmers are going to put in a generator to do irrigation? And the irrigation system are imported. That is dollar. That's another high cost to most farmers. So without power and without having these materials produced in Nigeria, this is not going to happen.
And now painting a bigger picture and having a sense of agriculture today and what sort of policy measures we ought to see. What's your forecast in terms of the fate of agribusinesses today, and then strategies to also stay afloat as double-digit inflation remains a reality?
Because of our population, we will always have to produce food to be able to feed our people. So agribusiness is not going anywhere. But what I'll tell young entrepreneurs coming in, go beyond just being a farmer doing backward integration. Anything you're going to do, try to go up one level up by doing a bit of processing. Then you can make more money. And also look at producing what you can produce all year round that people consume, and don't go into niche production. There are things we must always, if we're going to eat chicken all the time, we'll always have to eat tomatoes, peppers, onions. So do your research on what you know that will sell all year round. Try to make sure you have your market. Try to make sure you can even produce close to where the market is. So, infrastructure is not your problem. Cold rivers are not your problem and all that. But anybody who's going to do into production should also look at value add. Don't, as much as possible, don't sell everything in its raw state. Research is very important, because even if you look at the tomatoes we consume in Nigeria, we're consuming tomato that has a large high water content, which is not very good. And that's also what leads to spoilages. Yet we have research institutions here, whose job is it to give us the best seeds and livestock for whatever we're doing. Research is actually very critical. Because if you use, it's just like farming is like IT, garbage in, garbage out. If you use poor seeds, you're going to get bad yields. But if you use a high value seed that gives high yields, the chances of you making money is much higher and is also better for us. So research is very important. Some of the seeds and livestock that will grow here or that will raise here are not good for our environment. So they die off easily. Diseases come and they wipe them out. But if we use seeds and livestock and use livestock that are actually have been grown and start to fit our environment, then the conversation will be good. It will also help farmers and it will also decrease the losses we're having.
Thank you very much for your time on the show today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much, Dami.
But just before we go now, here are graphic details of the commodity price indices and also terms of trade for the second quarter of this year as prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics. And that's it on this edition of Business Week. Many thanks for watching so far. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm David Alabi. Bye for now.